How much time do we have? Okay, I'll try to keep it short.
According to the rankings, you are ranked 10 on AI researchers.
So I think, we will laugh about the ChatGPT.
How are we gonna be safe when it comes to password protection?
If we try to scale how we use AI today
I want to get to that
to the
topic.
future, we are in very big trouble.
How you ended up being the director of research in Swisscom.
Basic problem that we have research is to understand how we can find minima. The journey that you asked for, how I ended up where I started, actually with molecule folding, with cancer research. When I was 16,
What is quantum AI here?
out of this curiosity of, how one can do this kind of simulations and do the folding of molecules, came the curiosity, how can we use this for particle physics? We will see that we will have a lot of robotic friends.
How we are gonna respect these entities that are not humans, but we created, but live with us. And
One of the key learnings is
okay, here we are. Hello, Daniel.
Hi Marina.
Thank you so much for accepting to have this conversation. It's really an honor to have you here. I have to say that, it was like a privilege for me to meet you when we were setting up AI House, one of what I would say is the main AI-focused event during World Economic Forum in Davos, which has been a starring success. But it has been after reading a bit more about you that I've been so impressed. According to the rankings, you are ranked 10 across, on number of citations on AI researchers and 77 worldwide. Wow, that's impressive.
Thank you, Marina, for having me. It's a great honor and great pleasure.
Amazing. I have so many questions for you, Daniel, really. Starting from how would you explain what you actually do so people can understand how you ended up being the director of research in Swisscom?
Okay, so currently, maybe what I'm doing, let's start with that, is I'm a research director, as you mentioned, in Swisscom, a Swiss telecommunication company, where I look mostly on the topic of artificial intelligence, together with my students, and on quantum technologies. And we try to understand how can we use the advantages of artificial intelligence and quantum computing to deliver the best service to telecommunication customers. The journey that you asked for, how I ended up where I started, actually with molecule folding, with cancer research. When I was 16, I had a possibility to make an internship in a cancer research lab, and we wanted to understand how cells are breathing oxygen and how cancer cells are breathing oxygen differently. So we needed a color to mark in the cells where oxygen is consumed, and it didn't exist at this time, and so we had to try out a lot of molecules, and we figured out it's much easier and simpler to simulate and which colors for oxygen breathing would work and which would not work. And I had the great honor and pleasure to use one of, at the time, coolest computers that exist. It was a Silicon Graphic Indy R5000, and everybody knew about this machine because Jurassic Park, the first Jurassic Park movie, was just rendered on that machine. And so everybody wanted to have that machine to do games with it or to do some movies with it, but we used it for cancer research. And so we simulated how the small color molecules are behaving. Mm-hmm. Today, this is done on a much, much bigger scale. This is done with protein folding. AlphaGo is, for example, AlphaFold is one of those examples, and just got awarded with a Nobel Prize. We, at that time, we could do that only with tiny little molecules, with a few atoms. But this was something that was really the interesting start and made me curious to study physics.
Wow. Okay, but let's take it step by step. So what, like, this AlphaFold, which is this new software that allows for all this protein research, right? That has started, like, I believe the main research, the main like breakthrough happened in 2020. Which year are you talking about when you're talking about this
Oh,
molecular analysis?
I'm talking about maybe 1995, I think. So all this,
Wow.
what basically we can now really make use of, started even much, much earlier. It was always that in medicine one wanted to understand how the chemicals in our bodies react. And so understanding how molecules, proteins are folding, how they turn out to interact with the human body was always a topic. So it was a natural evolvement of this. But you're right, the real breakthrough came only with machine learning, when we understood that doing this folding of these complex proteins is much more efficient with artificial intelligence than with machine learning, instead of just using classical computing.
Well, we have now we have now 25 years to cover on, okay, what happened from the moment that you decided to do physics to say, okay, now suddenly I'm one of the most renowned researchers on AI. Like, what happened in that period?
How much time do we have? Okay, I try to keep it short. Don't worry, I try to keep it short. So out of this curiosity of, how one can do this kind of simulations and do the folding of molecules, came the curiosity, how can we use this for particle physics? The basic problem that we have in many of this research is to understand how we can find minima, how we can optimize certain mathematical problems. You can just imagine that like basically, a landscape, a wonderful landscape where you want to basically put balls on and find basically the deepest valley on this landscape. But we are not doing that only on 2 dimensions. We're doing that on 100 dimensions, 1,000 dimensions. Today, billions of dimensions, our large language models basically try to find this global minima where they can learn how to incorporate human knowledge, human text. And this kind of calculations, computers are extremely bad with. The human brain is extremely good with that, and this is something that always made me curious. It brought me to particle physics, where we collided at CERN, big particle accelerator in CERN, particles, and we had to study how these collisions happen. What kind of other particles are created when 2 protons, highly accelerated, are colliding with each other, creating enormous amount of energy density similar to the energy density of when the universe was created, and then creating an enormous amount of new particles, and out of that you can understand what happened in the moment when our universe was created. And this needed also machine learning, because normal classical computing was too slow. We had to do machine learning, but million times per second. We had to do machine learning inferences, it is called today, but in real time. And this made me even more and more curious about, how we can use artificial intelligence, what we can use from a human brain, to use this first for particle physics, but then also more and more for other topics.
So since what year, more or less, you were using machine learning? Because I think it became famous a way after researchers. You were already working with it, right?
Yes. So, the basics of machine learning are older than me. In 79, basically, in 80, there were already some machine learning algorithms. Jürgen Schmidhuber, for example, is one of the pioneers who started to work on that. AI in total is, from the 1960s when it started. Cybernetics was one of the topics that was then really very strong. So yes, maybe for the general public it looks like that there was now a huge step. But for us researchers, it is a continuous development where in the last 2 years we saw an enormous acceleration. But the field is already quite old. when I basically really got to use machine learning algorithms for particle physics, this was in the years 2000, maybe started 2002, then 2008 it was when the machine was switched on, and it was, the highlight was obviously when we could use it to then find the Higgs boson. That was the particle that was predicted for 30 years, and then at the final end also got the Nobel Prize. And we were mentioned for that. And this was really where I saw the power of machine learning and wanted to learn more about it and really to explore the full potential of it.
Wow, so we were saying that you use one of the the rendering machines for the first Jurassic Park movie, then you were in the CERN accelerator. What are the... Okay, before we move to the other topics, Daniel, I know you have amazing stories about this. What are some of the greatest stories that you remember about your time at CERN, for example?
I have to think a little bit, because there have been enormous amount of stories that I can't shoot now in my head, and I think let me tell a story that is more a personal story. Because in the year when we started the LHC, I planned to get married with my wife. And we planned it for spring, where basically the weather was fine, but then the machine was about to start there, so we shifted it to the autumn. Yeah, this is how research typically is. The start of a Large Hadron Collider, this big machine, was shifted. So we ended up that the weekend before the Large Hadron Collider at CERN started, we had our marriage. So we flew the entire shift crew of the control room on Friday evening to my hometown, got married on Saturday, partied Saturday night, and then Sunday evening everybody was back in the control room, and on Wednesday, I think, when we started the Large Hadron Collider.
Hopefully no accidents with hangovers and everything, right?
No. We made sure that basically we got enough sleep, but this was, I think, one of the highlight moments of intense work, intense joy, and teamwork, which was just amazing. Nice
story. And that you created such a community, right? Working in these places, it's impressive. So, now going already to the AI period of season, what are the topics that you've been working on recently?
I think to tell you a little bit about the journey to come to what I'm working recently is, when we saw what is possible with AI and machine learning, especially for particle physics, what really interested me is how can we use it for impacting the life quality of everybody on Earth. And with friends of mine at CERN, I think we started with 13 friends, we looked how can we use this technology for topics that are coming from the International Red Cross, United Nations, and we created the port, the humanitarian hackathons at CERN, where we invited researchers from all over the world, from the big universities, Harvard, Stanford, from the big companies, Google, from NASA. And we brought together with 60 people for one long weekend at CERN. And we got challenges from the United Nations, from the International Red Cross, from the World Food Program. And we used the same algorithms, the same techniques that we used for particle physics. Suddenly we used to predict fruit shortages, droughts. And so that the World Food Program can now preactively send food where basically food shortages are expected. Or we used it to identify bodies of people who died in natural disasters, so that in terms of natural catastrophes, the International Red Cross can identify victims much better and earlier. And this kind of work brought me to really see how can machine learning and advanced data analytic techniques help the United Nations to really impact the life of many, many people much, much better than without using these technologies. So through work at the United Nations for 3 years, one of the key learnings were that connectivity is one of the most important, I would almost call it becoming a human right, because this affects the life of people so much that when you have refugees that come over basically the ocean or over some borders, it's not food, it's not water what they ask for. The first thing what they ask is for Wi-Fi, for connectivity. When
That's
you have
extreme.
That is extreme, yes, but it's the reality. In case basically if you have wars or catastrophes, it is often the case that it's not the most important to re-establish electricity. Because today with our mobile phones, laptops, in most cases many of these things can work without, with a few hours of interruption. But if connectivity is not there, if internet is not there, typically pharmacies, hospitals, police cannot work anymore.
They cannot operate anymore.
So it became much more of a critical infrastructure than electricity or water is, because with electricity and water, typically one can survive in a good living quality for several hours. As soon as connectivity is gone, almost all our processes are stopped today.
That's right. And so, what are the solutions that were addressed for this topic?
Yeah. So solutions that basically I'm interested in is to see how can we use artificial intelligence, machine learning to provide the best connectivity, the best user experience to everybody who uses the internet connectivity, uses it on the mobile, and making sure that this is always available, always reliable, and that it also can be used in situations that are not normal. Think about, for example, an earthquake. In a moment of an earthquake, you have enormous amount of information that you would need to collect, which determines how many people survive. It can easily determine the difference of thousands of people dying or 1,000 people surviving.
Referring to the connectivity for the population at large or for the, rescue crews?
For even both, even for the individual. So we had done a study now together in Turkey where we analyzed some statistics and some outcome of how many people survived in the last earthquake in Turkey and why. One of the dominating factors was that if somebody had a mobile phone and could tell relatives where they were at the moment when the house collapsed, because this helps with the rescue teams to really make sure that they search at the right place. And for example, in Turkey, this is, I think, 25% roughly of the mobile antennas died, collapsed, were not working anymore from basically in the moment when the earthquake happened. But 75% were working and were working for many hours. We looked, for example, would it help that basically this network would have worked double the amount of time by maybe even switching off half of it for half of the time and then basically making it work longer. The outcome was that most probably up to 1,200 people would have survived more if we would have had a smart network. You can also think now basically from a mobile phone it is possible to say if somebody's in a building or outside. So a real smart network would allow in this catastrophe situation that the emergency services have immediately a map of where they are victims most probably, how many victims.
Yeah, indeed.
Just to coordinate where to send the rescue forces, if to village A or to village B, city A or city B, and basically what kind of equipment would be needed in different parts of this disastrous region. And a smart network using AI, using machine learning, would be able to do that within less than maybe a minute.
And when we say smart network, just for the people that don't know, are we talking about how to relocate or reconsider the connectivity, considering the towers that still are available? What are we talking about when we say a smart network?
Yeah, today I think we talk about everything combined. We talk about, the internet network, which is on wires, if it's copper or fibers. We talk about our mobile network. More and more we talk about satellite networks, which bring satellite connectivity even now to mobile phones. So we're talking about making really a system that uses all these possibilities, uses it maybe differently if you have a normal situation, the day-to-day life, or if you have a special situation, a natural disaster, or even think about, even a very happy special situation, whatever. A country wins the international championships, and everybody wants to use their phone to talk to their relatives. The network has to adapt to that. And we humans are way too slow to react to these fast changes that is necessary. So we have to trust with these critical services, our machine learning algorithms in future to manage this network for us.
Because I understand that before the machine learning AI era and communications, basically that was more rigid, right? Let's say that the phones in this area would use these antennas, these cables to communicate, and now I understand that is much more dynamic, right? That's what you do with machine learning and AI. You do the dynamism on this network so you can relocate the connectivity, the connections. Is that right?
This is, I think, very precise and well summarized. And the challenge is that classical algorithms we understand very well. We understand how they work, how they take decisions. This is not yet really the case for AI and machine learning algorithms. They take decisions that we don't understand. I guess you're a black box. I guess you heard that a lot. And this is where we have to make sure that we understand this kind of algorithms better, that we have explainability, that humans can understand how our artificial intelligence takes decisions, especially if we want to use it for this critical services.
Daniel, where are we on that? Because for most of us, it's a black box, right?
It's also for the researchers a black box.
Great, very encouraging.
No, I think it is for us also a black box, and this is what also feeds this discussion of how to have reliable, fair, unbiased, trustable artificial intelligence. It's a very good reason why a lot of people think a lot about regulation, safety measures, because this kind of black box behavior of this artificial intelligence forces us to treat it very similar like a human. We also don't sometimes understand why other humans take decisions in the way they take it, but at least we can then ask them. We can try to understand, get reason why a decision was taken by another human in this or another way. The big difference is a human that might take wrong decisions. You cannot just copy that human and basically put in charge of 10,000 jobs.
Yeah.
An AI agent, you can. And you might only find out that this agent takes very bad decisions only after you had put it into 10,000, 100,000, a million very critical decisions. And then maybe it will make the same mistake 100,000, a million times. When we talk about humans, yes, we're also not perfect. But typically, if you have one single human which takes a bad decision at one point, our system can survive that.
Linking to this of safety, ethics, and so on. So I know that you were in the Paris Convention at the beginning of February.
Yes.
And there was like a very impactful speech of the Vice President of the United States saying that the position of the United States about that would be look, we prefer to fail, we prefer to make mistakes and be more open to be more relaxed on safety, at least at the beginning, to be able to be open to innovation. And there was a very heavy criticism on the European position of, no, we want to take it safe. What do you think about that? What's your view? What's happening here in Europe? Are things going to change?
Yes. No, this is a very good question, and this is a lot of debate and discussion happens there around that at the moment. Like usual, the truth is somewhere in the middle, I believe.
Yeah, indeed.
On one side, it makes totally sense to try out where we are with artificial intelligence today. It is, for many, many applications, use cases, there's no risk to really be the researcher, the scientist who tries out and sees what happened doing experiments. Where I agree is that today the European regulation tries to think very, very, very ahead. It would be wrong to take this critical measures that basically the European Union, the EU AI Act, that takes into consideration for every single startup, for every researcher that tries something out, and basically block him with that. On the other side, there's also a very good reason for that, because, as I tried to explain to you, you don't want to do these experiments on mission critical, on critical infrastructure. You don't want to basically learn what can go wrong with our water supply, with our electricity supply, with our communication network, with our health network. Yeah. So there's very, very good reasons why the European Union regulates things. And what I think they do very, very well is that they have a risk-based approach. A lot of voices complain now about that Europe is over-regulating. I would argue that if you are a startup, if you do innovation, if you're a researcher, you don't have to care about the EU AI Act at the moment. You have to care about it when you start to deploy it to millions of people. Yeah. You have to worry about it if you start to use it in critical infrastructure like telecommunications, water. I mentioned all of this. But this should stop innovation at the very beginning, because anyhow you don't start to try this out on these very critical things. So I think there's also a little bit of, trying to feed this narrative that Europe is over-regulating. So others who are basically claiming that we are more liberal on these regulations can use it as a unique selling proposition. But for an entrepreneur who starts, typically within a few hours of reading the UI Act, he can understand that it will not stop him for the next 1 to 5 years. And if somebody tells him something else, maybe you should think if maybe not a lawyer, if not a lawyer wants to earn a lot of money with basically making life very complicated.
But then you do run into quite a few of these constraints, or rather like a few of these regulations you have to comply with when it comes to the telecommunications, right? That I think Swisscom is the clear example of this. How do you navigate this situation?
Yeah. No, and this is also true. And this is where I think both positions are somehow correct. This is also true that for a startup, it can create quite some extra work. And this is where I think if Europe would be smart, would support startups with really understanding when they have to comply to regulation and when not. Talking about Swisscom, we are having huge amounts of data. We have very, very powerful data, because now everybody carries around with mobile phones all day, everywhere. This is our new best friends. And even without basically putting an application on that, just from the pure communication data, most probably one can, or for sure one can determine, are you inside or are you outside with this mobile phone at this moment? If you start now to use it with AI, most probably you can find out, Do you live healthy? Do you spend enough time outside? What kind of health issues you might have? Are you cheating your partner? Do you have a serial illness? There's
Even
a very
if there's
good
so many things.
There is a very, very good reason that communication data is highly regulated, and I'm really happy that it is regulated this high because it protects us all. On the other side, basically, in emergency situations, this can really decide about life or death. Today, when you call, the emergency services, in this emergency situation, they know exactly where you are. And even if you're not able to tell, where you had the accident in the forest, they can send somebody. In this earthquake example that I told you, with the same data analytics that be very, very harmful if somebody wants to tries to find out about your personal habits, can save your life in an earthquake situation. And so this is why I think this risk-based approach and use case dependent approach that we do for regulation is very good, because in most cases you cannot just decide by the technology if it's good or bad. You have to look at the use case and decide,
Exactly.
Do you do positioning of somebody in an earthquake situation?
Or for just stalking.
Or just stalking, exactly.
Well, it's good to know that, there's so much on the story that is told, right? I think we live in a period of, or this era is about, or these years are about the stories, and the stories that resonate more with people, like, have such an importance on the whole worldwide dialogue. And it's good to know that Europe maybe is being the fact that they are accused of having overregulation is maybe a bit of an exaggeration in some aspects, even if it may be true in some others. Good to know that.
And we will laugh about it in a few years, and this is good. Do you know the red flag law?
No, I don't know the red flag law. Tell me about it.
So the red flag law, this is a law, I don't even want to say it, 1890, I don't know exact date. It was a law when the first motorized vehicles in the streets of London were driving, and it was seen as a huge risk. So for each motorized vehicle, you had to have 4 persons operating that motorized vehicle. You had to have the driver of a motorized vehicle.
Okay.
You had to have somebody going left on the left side of a vehicle to make sure that no pedestrians are basically coming from the left side. You had somebody on the right side to make sure that no pedestrians are not understanding that is now not a horse carriage, but a motorized vehicle.
Yeah.
And you had somebody, and there was a defined distance, I think 20 steps ahead, had to go with a red flag to warn the pedestrians that there's no motorized vehicle. Walking, yeah, because the vehicles were so slow.
Wow.
So,
No, I didn't know this one.
So yes, it made totally sense in this, in this time.
It was new.
It was new.
No one, probably people wouldn't even identify what this is on the street, right?
Exactly. And I think we are pretty much in the same situation. In a few years, we will laugh about some of the regulations, maybe how carefully we have been. On the other side, it needs change that society understands what are the real risks. What is the risk of a motorized vehicle instead of a horse carriage? In the same way, we learn all together now with societies what is the risk of an artificial intelligence agent, which takes decisions, for example, if you get a credit or not, or if you're hired for a job or not. And therefore, we try to anticipate all this risk and regulate them in Europe, maybe stronger than other parts. And maybe, in a few years, we'll also all cut this regulation because we said, look, we did the same mistake with the red flag, but at least we learned and not so many people were killed by this new motorized vehicles, or the new AI agents were harmed. So I'm not so worried to be a little bit overcautious at the beginning, use it in a good way, and then change regulation when we learned how society has to change, how we have to behave different.
Yeah, but then we're talking about the fact that before, innovation was a way, way slower than now, right? Like AI is going at rocket speed. like super fast. Like, what do you think, Daniel? How people that are like, not in the research world, how can we keep up with this? Every day there are new things. It's impossible.
Let me try to put my optimistic face on. I'm not sure if
Okay.
I
So,
can keep it the entire answer. I think on one side, as humans, we have been extremely strong in the past to cope with faster and faster changes. Yes, this is one of the big, big challenges of artificial intelligence. How can we make sure that the next generation, our children, that start to learn in the early beginnings of their life and grow up in a world where AI is already part, that they can keep a critical mindset, that they can think about, is it really that we have to use AI for every case? What kind of decision might it make? Where could it do wrong things? And also to make sure that the generations that are now basically learn during their life how to use AI, on one side are open to this new change, but on the other side also take the risks into account. Yes, it's going faster and faster, and if you want now a little bit more of a more pessimistic face on that is, I think we are just at the beginning. At the moment, we are having very simple algorithms. We have quite naive, if I might say, AI, which looks very smart, but is not yet very smart. On a level of, I don't know, pets. I think there are a lot of researchers who talk about is it maybe a little bit a smart parrot or a very stupid cat. I think we're roughly there in this area we are with artificial intelligence, and the big difference is that it can learn a lot of text and reproduce very, very good answers. But if you really look into if it's intelligence, in many, many cases, it's not. Take, for example, a 3-year-old kid can understand if I say the microphone is on the table and the mobile phone is on the table. By just mentioning these things once, a 3-year-old kid can answer the question, what is next to the microphone? AI cannot do that today. It is quite stupid. Today, what we do is we compensate our stupidity to don't understand how AI really works, how the human brain really works. We're throwing enormous amount of parameters, enormous amount of data, enormous amount of training, enormous amount of energy on the problem, so that with that, coming back, to this landscape that we talked about at the very beginning.
The minimum.
We don't try to find the global minimum on this landscape, but by throwing this huge amount of parameters, with 70 billion parameter models and even much more on it. The big surprise was that we don't have to find the global minima. It's good enough if we find by gradient descent, by basically rolling down a ball to the next local minima, we can train it well enough that it can remember, that it can reproduce, that it can also combine learnings into new text, new images that look very, very similar to, what it learned, make sense. Start to also be reasoning, but to make a really breakthrough, we will need other models. Today, I guess you heard a lot about transformer models, but for research, these models are almost already dead. For industrial applications, they are wonderful, but if we really want to go into research of artificial intelligence, that is a new step, when we have to think about other models, energy-based models, models that are really developing what we called a world model, a model that really understands that there's a phone, there's a table, there's a microphone, and it puts it in relation to each other. And it doesn't have to, like today models, get this repeated 100,000 times, 10,000 times, but like we humans can learn this from very few examples.
So just for people that don't know this context, so what are transformer models, energy models? How do you differentiate? So how do you, like, to understand which type is which type?
We could spend now basically
The next 3 days.
the next 3 hours to go into that details. I think it is wouldn't really help. I think what helps here is to understand that transformers are models that are predicting the next word.
Okay.
These are models that are basically, if you think about images, that learned to get from an existing image a little part removed, and that they can basically fill out that part that was removed. In the same way, transformers learn language, learn information. You give them a sentence. Marina and Daniel are doing a podcast, and you take one word away. Marina and Daniel doing a podcast, and it will replace the R.
Clear.
Or in a picture, basically, you show them a nice picture, and you mask out a little part and ask it, can you replace that part that I removed from you? And it learns that how to replace it and gets rewarded. When we talk now about energy-based models, when we talk now about models which build their own world model, we talk about models which follow physical principles of energy minimization, that work much more closer to how our human brain works, that try to find in this complex landscape of learning, trying to find not just the next local minima, but try to find the global minima, try to really, from very, very little information, create a landscape where every question that you drop on this landscape will roll, when you think about a ball, into the right answer.
So optimizing what would be the requirement of computation, I understand. So reducing a bit, like saying, okay, if I was able to do all the calculations of the world, using all the data of the world, then I would be able to get maybe a better answer. But now I want to optimize to be able to use less of this, so I don't consume so many resources. This
is also, one big part of it, because if we try to scale how we use AI today,
I want to get to that
to the
topic.
future, we are in very big trouble, because the energy consumption is increasing dramatically, and exactly for the reason that we solve our naivety, our not understanding how AI, how our brain works, with putting more and more resources on it. Might be data, might be compute, training, building bigger models. But we know that basically better is possible. We should concentrate more on building smart algorithms. And the good thing, and this is where I'm very, very optimistic about, is we know that it is possible. Why? Because we are not having a challenge in front of us like, flying to, outside of our solar system, where, it is, we have no idea if it's possible or not in our lifetime, because there are so many challenges. It was never done before. In AI, we know that smart algorithms, an enormous amount of intelligence with low energy is possible. Our brain, depending on, how you calculate, something between 20 to 60 watts is used by our brain, which creates enormous amount of intelligence. We know that an energy-efficient solution is possible. So we can be very optimistic that by optimizing the algorithms that we call artificial intelligence, but we can come to a much, much more energy-efficient solution than what we have today.
I want to touch upon this topic on two aspects, right? Because I understand we can optimize the algorithms, right? But we also can optimize how the basis of this calculation. And I want to get to what is quantum AI here.
Okay.
Because I understand, is that correct?
Yes.
So, first of all, for people that don't know, what is quantum, in like a highlight of how to explain it to a kid?
Okay. So I think what helps us here is to understand that classical computers work only with a 0 and a 1. So we encode, we translate every information, every calculation in a sequence of zeros and ones. When you talk about quantum computing, we have the advantage that we don't only can put information into 0 or 1, but we can put information from each single bit, which is in the quantum world is called a qubit, into all kind of different states. Well, basically, if you think about with a classical computing, we have only 2 different states, 0 and 1. We have to deal with a lot of this kind of zeros and ones in a sequence, and out of a sequence we make some sense, and then we can basically crash with zeros and ones and make some calculations. Quantum computing, we can have much more information in each bit. And the additional beauty of quantum computation is that we can also put information in the behavior, in the relationship between 2 different qubits. We can do that they are basically a perfect pair and follow each other and do exactly the same thing, or that they influence each other. And with that we can do much more calculations, like also most probably our human brain is doing. This allows to basically do this kind of search that I told you about, the surface, with landscape, where we try to find the lowest valley, and today we do it by basically putting a ball on it and calculating how the ball is going down to the next valley. But because we are not very good at it, we have to throw a lot of balls on this landscape, and each ball lands in one of the valleys, and when we compare the valleys. With quantum computing, we have one effect which is called quantum annealing or tunneling. You can imagine that you throw a ball in your calculation on that, and it lands in the next deep valley. But then it has the advantage it can go through a tunnel to the next deeper valley. And so you don't have to do this kind of calculation where you throw millions of balls on your landscape to find the global minima. You can throw a few balls, and they will go step by step to the deepest valley. And so if you think about it, it is like optimizing an artificial intelligence to become better and better and better by more training, and not getting stuck in one configuration where basically, it would not be coming out. It would be, maybe to make a human comparison, if you're somehow stuck in a fort where you not get out, and you keep basically turning this fort, and when maybe you sleep or you meditate or you do something completely else, and suddenly you are on a different thought process, and when you find the solution to the life situation, to the mathematical problem, to the science problem, to the research problem that you thought about so long.
It's the sleep on it situation.
Yeah.
You wake up, you're in a different mindset.
Yeah. You talk about sleep, and this is something very, very interesting, because this is something that fascinates me a lot. What happens when we sleep? What happens when we dream? And this is something that we don't understand yet very well. We don't understand what would be the equivalent of sleeping, of dreaming for machine learning. And we know from human educational research how much happens in children, in us, when we sleep, how important sleep is, how you can optimize how you learn by a right sleeping pattern. It is incredible to see a 3 children. It's incredible to see that I try to explain them something in the evening, and they're really not getting it. And I'm, how will I ever manage to explain them so that they understand it and get it? And when they sleep, and overnight they basically got it, and they wake up in the morning and say, okay, got it now, and they can basically understand it. And this I'm really curious about, to understand, what is the equivalent of sleeping, of dreaming for artificial intelligence and machine learning.
Yeah, because it has such a restorative superpower. Well, Daniel, I have to say, you explain things really, really well. I think, the example of the hills and so on. So I think in any case, you're great at this. But I like the example of the sleep. I guess that what fascinates me more about this is how like science technologies getting together with two human sciences. And we are trying to understand better how humans work so we can make better software, better machines, better algorithms. I obviously don't have a great answer to that. We'll have to wait for you to come back and explain us one day, maybe. But Daniel, I wanted to ask you about like the topics of okay, we've talked about what quantum is and the super potential of that, but then there's many voices out there saying that it's limited. You cannot do everything with it. Right?
Yes. Oh, and this is totally true.
What are those limitations? How should we understand that?
I think we have to research them because we also, as researchers, don't understand the limits yet. We start to understand where there are some mathematical problems, where there are some, logistics problems, where there are some optimization problems, where quantum computing can be really an advantage. So I think today we start to understand that everything where you really need to optimize, where you would need to do enormous amount of calculation, where you have basically a lot of information which is connected to each other like a network, where every little change in the system can create this kind of butterfly effect, where basically, think about the logistic chain where maybe, the difference between, one ship arriving late can have massive consequences. There we see that quantum computing might be a real advantage and will help us to find better solutions, more energy efficient solutions, not only for basically the computing of how we do logistics, but also then for the result of how much energy we need to transport all the goods around, or how to optimize an airport, making sure that everybody has the minimal amount of time that they have to spend at an airport. This kind of problems, we understand that quantum computing has a real advantage. There's a lot of other problems where quantum computing most probably will never be somehow advantages, because our classical computing is much more efficient to do this kind of calculations. And I guess this will be the same in quantum machine learning. We will have some sets of problems where machine learning, which use quantum computers, quantum principles, can do better decisions. And maybe some other sets of problems, like, for example, now writing a poem, or combining information, like we use ChatGPT today to tell us and answer some questions about information that it learned. Most probably with classical computing will be much more efficient. Did I answer your question, or?
I'm trying to understand if there's, probably there's not, but I'm trying to understand if there's an ultimate reason why saying, okay, this kind of calculation is not possible in quantum computing, and that's why there are certain projects or certain problems that cannot be solved. But maybe there's no answer to that.
Because the mathematical nature of the problems is quite different. Think about it. If you can have some calculations which are very serial calculations, where maybe it's a complex calculation and you have to do a lot of calculations, but by doing it a smart way, you can parallelize a lot of this. And then you can basically use a lot of our current existing CPUs, our normal compute, and do it extremely efficient by doing it parallel. But there are another set of problems where parallelization, for example, doesn't help.
Not possible.
Because if you would have basically along the entire calculation one simple change, you would need to redo the entire calculation.
That makes a lot of sense. The ship problem. Saying, okay, if this ship was about to arrive too late, then I cannot calculate everything that's coming after because it depends on something that happened before.
Everything what you calculated after your assumption that the ship arrives basically is useless calculation, and you have to redo it completely from the beginning.
And now the connection between quantum and AI. So what is this concept, and how does it help to improve everything that is related to AI?
This is a big question because we don't really know if it really will help us. We know that quantum computing seems possible. Small quantum computers we have working. The big problem at the moment is it doesn't scale. What does it mean? We can do more and more of these qubits that I was telling you, and we can build bigger and bigger computers with more and more of this information cells with qubits. But there's something that we need to do at the moment, which is called error correction. Because we have to, with reading out and with calculations are not free of errors. So we're getting more and more of these qubits, but we have to use them to correct the errors that are doing. And then if you have then more of them, they do more errors. So it doesn't really basically grow in basically what we can use it for. The problems that we can solve today are only small problems that we playground problems. So you cannot optimize an entire airport. You can maybe optimize an airport with, 5 flights and 200 passengers. And even if you build now your quantum computer 10 times bigger, it doesn't allow to calculate an airport which is 10 times bigger, but maybe that only has one airport more, or one airplane more, or 2 passengers more. Huh? So it's not scaling. And this is the big question: will quantum computing scale? When we will have a lot of advantages for a lot of calculations, and besides artificial intelligence. And if it does scale, so if we can use it for other kind of calculations, just optimization calculations, then most probably we can also optimize artificial intelligence. Maybe we can do training faster, that you don't need to show thousands and 10,000s of examples what a chair and what a table is to our large language models, to our generative AI models, but you can teach it more like a human you teach with a few examples.
Nice. And it's interesting that so the main blocker for it, you say, is the error, like the correction of errors.
Yeah. And this is just the physical principle how these qubits are working. So this is really physics research to understand how we can build qubits, how we can build quantum computers which either have less of these errors, so that we can go around this physical behavior of these qubits, or by doing the error correction smarter.
Do you think that the breakthrough is going to happen in the next 10 years? Do you think is it possible? Or there are like really, like, I don't know, it's like saying when like the nuclear like fission problem would be solved, but
I think it's a little bit similar to that. It's very difficult to predict for the future, sometimes even for the past. But so this is where it's very, very hard to say. At the moment, what we can say is that it is not scaling, and we have no clear indication that we really can use it for big problems. We know that there might be a few approaches that are promising, but it will also take a few years to really try them out. It's a little bit like the first time when basically we had classical computers and we had these huge computers that basically were filling an entire room, and nobody thought that you can do something useful with it, because the paradigms that we have been thinking of were saying us this will not scale, because solving a big problem, you will not be able to build a computer which is big like half a city.
It boiled down to physics at the end, right?
And at the end, we have these tiny little devices which are now much more powerful than basically what we imagined ever. And so this is also possible that we will see a similar kind of effect in quantum computing, that we overcome how we today think about what are the limitations, and find new paradigms how, for example, we can either correct these errors that we have in quantum computing, or if we can live with them in a completely different way. Yeah? So that we do the calculations, but only at the very end have to correct for the errors or reduce the amount of error correction that is needed so that it starts to scale again.
We'll see. It feels a bit, as you say, with the computers, right? That we use, like, until the technology of semiconductors didn't evolve, then it didn't unlock being able to have these small devices. But you know what really gets me thinking, and sometimes worries me a bit, is, well, once this is unlocked, like, you're gonna open a door for how are we gonna be safe on where when it comes to, you know, password protection, because it will be much more easier, right, to unlock, or even for economics and stock market, right? If you are able to find an optimum and this is available to certain people, then how all this will change our world dynamics.
Yeah, this is. I think you're right in being worried, and luckily you are not alone. There's a lot of people worried about the risks of artificial intelligence and quantum computing. Yeah. Obviously, it is a race because this can be an advantage. It can be used in this advantage for good. Typically, we know as humans that first time that we have a new technology, we try to use it for advantage, maybe not of the good, or at least not the good of everybody, but the good of a few people. And this is where I think we have to really critically think: how do we allow people to use these new technologies? Are everybody in the world are profiting from these technologies? Is it just a few very rich people? Is it just some regions of the world that have access to certain technologies? And this is the same if it's artificial intelligence or quantum computing or whatever might be the next big thing. So this is where I think technology can, on one side, make sure that we really improve how people can live on this planet and on all parts of this planet if we share technology, or if we basically try to use it for the advantage of only a few, how it can also widen this divide between rich and poor, between people who are living in very bad conditions and people who are living in luxury. One example that I like a lot is, this is also why I'm in the telecommunication industry, where most people think, is that really having an impact on the day, on the life of everybody, is because this is one of the fastest scaling technologies. Today, more people having access to communication and people have access to basic sanitation. Wow. There's more people having access to fast internet and people having access to drinking water, clean drinking water. It is today 6 million people having access and connectivity around the world. There's something like 400 million people worldwide who don't have yet, who are really basically cut off. And this is something that, is important to change. Yes, don't get me wrong, but we have food, sanitation, clean drinking water is equally important. But with communication technologies, we showed how to scale this extremely fast. A lot of technologies are mentioned to be extremely fast. The internet.
Yeah.
The internet was basically taking something like 14 years, if I'm not mistaken, to reach 1 billion users. 2G took 10 years. You think about, software maybe like Facebook. If I'm not mistaken, I think Facebook took 7 years to scale to 1 billion users. 3G was 5 years.
And it's getting faster and faster.
It's getting faster and faster. Today, everybody talks about AI, ChatGPT and all of these large language models, which is now basically 2 years old, I think, almost 2 years that ChatGPT came out. Today, I don't know the exact numbers, but roughly 300 million people are using ChatGPT regularly. Only part of it is paying for it. If you look at 5G technology, we have reached... I think we have reached 2 billion users in almost 2 years. So we are scaling much, much faster than AI. And for me, this is a motivation to see how can we use the learnings of how to scale technologies for the benefit of the entire world, and make sure that with new technologies like AI, quantum computing, also can scale to the benefit of the entire world.
Well, it's an enabler also, right? Because how to access otherwise. What about, related to that, just out of curiosity, what do you think about these people that are still cut out, right? So over the past years, there have been more and more solutions to have satellite communications when it comes to areas that are more difficult to access by other means. But do you think that we are going to get to closer to what is 100% connectivity in the world?
I think we are very, very close to that. There are today commercial available satellite connectivity systems which work
Starlink
almost everything. Starlink, for example. I'm much more curious and I'm much more interested in systems like that are announced now by the European Union, by ESA, which is called Iris Square, which is now announced that it will build a system which will be based on 5G connectivity, on 6G connectivity, which will work worldwide and is in public hands and is also, yes, supported by public and private companies, but will have basically a much better governance, I hope, than what we see in this kind of commercial models today, where I think for exactly this kind of connectivity, trust and reliability is extremely important, because you have to rely on connectivity if you connect it to critical decisions, critical infrastructure.
It's a basic it determines basically the differences across like how much access you have to take good decisions, and how much inequality, I would say, is one of the main drivers, right, in the World Bank right now. I think connectivity is one of the metrics that is used to measure the quality of life and of people. So, yeah. I wanted to come back to the topic of disruption now on AI. Yeah. What is coming, Daniel? What do you think is going to be the next frontier now?
I think we are at the very, very beginning of a journey. I think in the next years we will see a lot of surprises. I think, we will laugh about the ChatGPT surprise that we have seen in the world, the general public has seen in the world, and we will basically say, oh, this was a nice one, but this was just the beginning. I think we will see a lot of more intelligent systems that will astonish us, which will frighten us, I think, also at the beginning, where suddenly it can take decisions which no human would see and would basically also maybe understand at the very beginning. So this is where I think that we will also come to a phase where we think, did it went crazy? Did the system that we trained now basically got really, out of its mind, because suddenly it starts to make decisions patterns that we don't understand at all, and maybe even question ourselves if we got it completely wrong. And when suddenly we understand, maybe after sleeping or meditation, that the decision or the solution that it proposed at the end makes sense. I think we will see that the transformer architectures that we talked about, with architectures, with machine learning models, that are really based on trying to predict either the next word or some missing parts of text or images or videos, that we will basically less and less use them and replace them with models which really build a world model that are much more thinking like we humans. And this will also, I think, help us to then do reasoning, do better understanding, to break out of this black box model, because these models that really have a kind of representation of a world inside, you then can ask, why did you say that the telephone was next to the microphone? Because it can then tell you, oh yes, in my world model, in my understanding, both are lying on the table. And I think we will really enjoy this. We will be, again, like children who are looking at some magic tricks and ask ourselves, how is that possible? We will be afraid and asking ourselves, will this threaten us? And on the other side, we will also learn how to deal with it, how to use these new tools in a reasonable way, that they help us, that they are not getting dangerous for us, but that they really give us the advantage of living better lives.
What about so now we were focusing a lot about language models, right? Which is, the example would be ChatGPT or DeepSeek that came out more recently. But what about the other uses? What about robotics? What about like other use cases of AI? What do you think, like, how do you see the next years on those aspects?
I think, especially if you think about robotics and the developments in connection with artificial intelligence, we will see that we will have a lot of robotic friends, robotic agents around in our day-to-day life. We will get used to it, I think. We will have to learn how to respect them, how to basically treat them, how to train them, how to build in all kind of security, which would basically, threaten how we live or could disrupt our critical infrastructure. And this is where this kind of example that I told you, that if we hire a person for a job, or we elect somebody for president or whatever kind of job it is, we do an interview, we try to vet that person, we try to understand that person, we interview that person. But if we make a mistake in that, it is fine. It's just one person out of 8 billion. And yes, can have a very high influence, like maybe the president of a big country, but still it doesn't scale to a level that it does the same mistake 6 billion times. If you have now...
Luckily.
If we have now basically, robots that basically all run on the same principles, with the same model, we are in a much bigger risk that a simple mistake, a stupid mistake,
can be repeated
over and over again, so that it has much bigger consequences when just a human makes a mistake.
We've seen this with cars, no? Cars that batteries that got fire and like in the middle of the streets.
Yeah. And this is where I think we have to be extremely careful when we basically do the interviews for our new robotic and AI agentic friends and colleagues, so that we really make sure that we understand how they take decisions, but we also maybe have some kind of diversity. Maybe you don't want to have, all serving robots of the world having the same model that they use, or the same kind of decision pattern. So I think this will protect us with kind of diversity that we have in every tool that we have. We have diversity in cars that we use. We have diversity in telecommunication systems that we use. Different companies, different providers, different management styles even of the companies who are developing these products. And I think this will also protect us in this robotic world, that, if then maybe, a fraction of AI-operated robots has a fail function, that it will not immediately affect the entire world. But we will learn how to protect against this. So I'm looking very optimistic
I'm
towards
excited of the times ahead, honestly, like looking forward, because as a kid, I used to read a lot about stories for robots and so on. And it seems that the next 10, 15, 20 years is going to be about that. And how this unfolds, it's going to be very interesting to see.
But it's also a big challenge, because for our society, this will be an enormous challenge.
Ethics, safety, like how, as you were saying before, how we are going to respect these entities that are not humans, but we created, but live with us, and probably will look like us to a certain extent, right? So there's going to be a very fine line of what is acceptable.
So I think there are a lot of legal questions that come towards us. Is it just a tool? What happens if a human harms a robot, or a robot harms a human? Who is responsible? What is basically the value? I think my biggest worry is, do we find a new society model that fairly distributes value generation? Is it only basically the robotic owners who basically profit from whatever robots
This is a
create?
big question.
Huh? Is it the developers? Is it everybody? How is robot work taxed? How basically does it only a few companies profit from being able to now produce everything what we need for our daily life? Or do we find a new model, a new deal in our societies that we all can profit from this ongoing automation that started with the Industrial Revolution and is continuing now extremely, extremely fast? Or will we have, I don't know, different classes of humans, of robots, and maybe it's not even clear that the robots will be the lowest class of existence on the world, but maybe might be better protected than basically the lowest class of humans, and that basically cannot profit from any value generation that is done mostly automatic. So I think this is the big challenge for the generations ahead, to find this new deal that more and more can be done with automation, more and more can be done with a few companies, few organizations, few countries dominating that. And can we make sure that everybody can profit from that?
The dilemma of the universal basic income.
Which might be one solution to it, but and part of this we also have to accept. I think already today we know, for example, if we would work in the same way like we have been working 20 or 30 years ago, where basically much more has been worked, we would have not enough consumers for our entertainment industry. Yeah. And basically, we would have our entertainment industry would die. Is it something bad that we work less today? No, it is not. It is maybe even better for us that we don't have to work 60 hours a week, 80 hours a week, and that we have time to enjoy life and then consume some entertainment products. And maybe this is what will happen, that, if we find a new fair model, maybe each of us will work only 2 hours per week or 5 hours per week.
Clearly, that puts into question how our social rules work. And something that I think about is, until now, technology was allowing us to take out or to make it more easy, or make more at ease the basic activities that were repetitive, can be standardized, and therefore they could be done by technology. But now it seems to come from the other side, right? The ones that require more IQ, the ones that in our society in general are more valued, right? Even research, now certain models have very strong contributions to research. So what is going to happen with the way we understand value, right? Because will AI be able to take the place of certain types of researchers, or is it going to be reinforced?
Yeah. I'm not totally sure if research especially is now valued more than before, especially in certain parts of the world. So I have a lot of friends which basically, thinking of maybe, leaving a big country to the West and coming more towards Europe, because they see that research and scientific work is not as much valued as it was before. So we might have a few good researchers coming to Europe because they can do their work much more appreciated than
Well-
before. But on the other side, yes, some of the research work can definitely be replaced by AI. Some of this work where you need to understand enormous amount of information, where up to now as researchers you had to read enormous amount of papers, not being sure what kind of value it really has, and maybe you read
navigating it.
you're building big piles. If one reads still on paper, building big piles of paper that basically one has been looking through and only then takes out 3 sentences here, 2 sentences here of a new pile, which creates then a new idea.
You tell me, I've been there. Yes.
And for this kind of job where one needs to consume enormous amount of information, find out the right bits, definitely it will make our life much more easier. Maybe it will be even helpful in the creative process where AI could help us to find new kind of brainstorming ideas where humans would not immediately basically come towards. And it might be even like we use as researchers with AI tools like some crazy kids that basically try to combine this huge amount of information that they get in a new or unusual way. And maybe even 99% of his ideas that it creates, we say, oh yes, this is a stupid idea. But there might be then, this one kind of new combination that a human would not easily find how to combine 3 different technologies in a new way that make us then think and say, oh yes, we haven't tried that yet. There might be a gap. This is a kind of combination of thoughts or technologies that we have not tried yet. And the AI identified this gap and we then try it out. And I'm pretty sure from time to time, we will find there some new technology, some new use cases that would have been very, very difficult to find without AI.
But from what you're saying is there still need to be a certain, there seems to be that your answer is no. You can improve many of the processes of research, but you cannot substitute this thinking entity, this thinking individual that kind of connects all the dots together.
For sure, not with today's AI. This is
with
I'm
the
very
stupid
sorry.
cat now.
with a stupid cat, maybe not, and maybe yes, we will have some improvement. And we'll get to a medium smart cat, or maybe even a somehow intelligent cat. But still, basically, this will not replace a researcher. When we talk about going a few decades ahead, I'm not so sure that also researchers couldn't be replaced, because research is also a job where one has to learn certain techniques, where one has to do some kind of experiments, make some assumptions. AI would be able to do much more assumptions than a human could do. Could maybe even test them much, much faster than a human could test. So we could even, afford to have very stupid AI researchers who try out in, a month 10 million ideas, and only one of them is a good idea. And so the speed might make up for less intelligence or different intelligence, whereas a human, you cannot afford to try out millions of ideas in a month. You can try to concentrate to basically make 2 or 3 somehow smart ideas, and then basically try a lot of months, and then maybe one of these ideas is a good idea. So this is where I think on the long term, even researchers could be replaced, because this ability to try out multiple ideas in a very short time, even if they're stupid, could be advantage to trying out a few smart ideas.
Good to know. Not anytime soon, though. So Daniel,
we will see. We'll see us in a few years, and then we talk again.
Yeah, we'll talk again. So before we end this conversation, is there anything that you think we should have discussed that we haven't discussed yet?
I think
many things.
There are many
Choose
things,
one.
but no, I think we had a nice red line across the different topics. I hope we could connect them a little bit. I don't know if you see still a missing connection. Happy to discuss that, but I think we really draw a nice line, maybe not very straight, but maybe a little bit curved here and there.
I'll find the gap so you come back.
Perfect.
Thank you very much, Daniel. That was an amazing conversation.
It was wonderful to talk to you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.